Sir, I'm legally parked on a public street. Am I being detained or is this consensual?
I don't need a law lecture. You're loitering. Get out or I'll pull you out.
You have no reasonable suspicion. This stop violates the Fourth Amendment.
Turn around. Hands on the car. Now.
For the record, this is unlawful, and your camera is watching.
Officer Kyle Vinson had been patrolling the streets of Chicago for 6 years when he made the decision that would implode his life and drain the city's coffers of $4.5 million. He was 28 years old, a man who wore his badge not as a shield to protect, but as a hammer to intimidate. On a crisp Thursday morning in the affluent suburb of Oak Ridge, Vinson received a dispatch call that should have been routine. Instead, his response to it would become a case study in every police academy in the state, not as an example to follow, but as a warning of what happens when arrogance meets absolute authority. But Vinson didn't know any of that yet. He only knew that he was right and that his judgment was never to be questioned. Before we dive into the details of this catastrophic failure of policing, I want to know, where are you tuning in from today? Let us know in the comments, and if you believe in holding power accountable, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring these stories out of the shadows. Officer Vinson's personnel file was a minefield of red flags that the department had conveniently chosen to ignore. In 6 years, he had accrued 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy or unprofessional conduct, euphemisms often used when an officer is aggressive but manages to stay just inside the lines of the law. He was known in his precinct as a proactive officer, the kind who went looking for trouble rather than waiting for it to be reported. His supervisors praised his high ticket numbers and his arrest stats, turning a blind eye to the community trust he was eroding with every shift. He had a reputation for stopping luxury vehicles driven by minority men claiming they fit the description of stolen cars, only to release them after 45 minutes of humiliation on the side of the road. To Vinson, the law was a tool he owned, not a standard he served. The morning of the incident. October 14th was bright and clear. Vinson was patrolling Oak Ridge, a neighborhood of sprawling lawns, 3-car garages, and quiet streets lined with oak trees that were just beginning to turn gold. It was a place where people moved to escape the noise of the city, a place where the residents paid high taxes and expected concierge policing. Vinson liked working this beat. It made him feel powerful. He felt like the gatekeeper of a fortress. At 10:10 a.m., his radio crackled to life. Unit 4 Alpha, we have a call from a resident on Elmwood Drive. Suspicious vehicle. Black male driver sitting in a parked sedan for approximately 20 minutes. Caller states he appears to be casing the neighborhood. Vinson grabbed the radio mic, a smirk touching his lips. 4 Alpha, show me en route. In his mind, the narrative was already written. A black man in a parked car in Oak Ridge, probably a drug deal waiting to happen, maybe a porch pirate scouting for Amazon packages, or perhaps a burglar waiting for homeowners to leave for work. It didn't cross his mind that it could be a resident, a guest, or a contractor. The bias that had festered in his subconscious for years immediately filled in the blanks. He hit the accelerator, his cruiser surging forward. He wasn't going to investigate. He was going to dominate. He turned onto Elmwood Drive at 10:15 a.m., his eyes scanning the street until they landed on a sleek, charcoal-gray luxury sedan parked legally against the curb. Inside sat a man looking down at some papers. Vinson didn't see a citizen. He saw a target. The man sitting in the charcoal sedan was Dr. Marcus Thorne. At 58 years old, Thorne was a figure of immense stature in the law enforcement community, though Kyle Vinson had no idea who he was. Thorne had spent 30 years with the state police, rising through the ranks from a beat cop in the toughest districts to deputy chief of the entire force. After retiring from active duty, he hadn't slowed down. He had earned his doctorate in criminal justice and was currently serving as the director of ethics and standards at the State Police Academy. He was literally the man who wrote the book on constitutional policing. The training manuals in the trunk of Vinson's cruiser Thorne had edited the last 3 editions. The protocols for Terry stops, and reasonable suspicion Thorne had testified before the state Senate to get them codified into law. Thorne was sitting in his car because he was early. He was looking to downsize now that his children were grown, and he had a 10:30 a.m. appointment with a real estate agent to view the colonial-style house across the street. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie, his standard attire for a business day. He was reviewing the property disclosures and checking his emails on his tablet. He had the window cracked open to let in the fresh autumn air, enjoying the quiet of the neighborhood. He had noticed the curtain twitching in the house 2 doors down, the home of Mrs. Brenda Higgins, but he had dismissed it. He was used to being watched. In a 30-year career, he had learned that a black man in a suit was often viewed with more suspicion than a white man in a hoodie. He saw the patrol car turn the corner. He watched in his rearview mirror as the cruiser accelerated unnecessarily, the engine roaring briefly before the officer slammed on the brakes, pulling up behind Thorne's sedan at an aggressive angle. It was a tactical park designed to block escape and intimidate the occupant. Thorne sighed, folding his hands on the steering wheel, a habit ingrained from decades of training and survival. He knew exactly what was about to happen. He checked the time, 10:17 a.m. He mentally prepared himself. He wasn't worried about being arrested. He knew the law better than the man walking toward him, but he was disappointed. He had hoped the department had moved past this. Thorne watched the officer exit the vehicle. He noted the tactical sunglasses, the lack of a hat, the hand resting dangerously close to the grip of his service weapon. He noted the officer's body language, shoulders squared, chest puffed out, walking a straight line of aggression. There was no caution, only confrontation. Thorne knew the procedure. The officer should approach with caution, but courtesy, identify himself, and state the reason for the inquiry. He watched as Officer Vinson stopped at the B-pillar of the sedan, preventing Thorne from opening the door, and leaned down. Thorne lowered the window the rest of the way, turning to face the young officer. He saw the nameplate K. Vinson. He filed it away in his memory. "Good morning, officer." Thorne said, his voice a deep, calm baritone that had commanded briefing rooms for decades. "How can I help you?" The call that summoned Vinson had come from Brenda Higgins, a 62-year-old retiree who spent her days monitoring the neighborhood app and watching the street from her living room window. Brenda was the self-appointed guardian of Elmwood Drive. She believed that safety meant sameness, and anything that deviated from her expected pattern was a threat. When she saw Thorne pull up and park, she didn't see a potential neighbor. She saw an anomaly. She watched him for 10 minutes. He didn't get out. He was just sitting there, reading. To Brenda, reading in a car wasn't a valid activity for a stranger in her neighborhood. It was loitering. It was casing. She had dialed the non-emergency line first, then hung up and dialed 911 to ensure a faster response. "There's a man sitting in a car outside my house," she told the dispatcher, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "He's been there for an hour. He's watching the houses. I think he has a weapon. He keeps reaching under the seat." That last part was a fabrication, a detail added to juice the priority of the call. She knew that mentioning a weapon would bring the police faster. "He doesn't belong here," she added. "He looks dangerous." The dispatcher had asked for a description. "He's black, driving a dark car. Please hurry, I'm scared to go to my mailbox." When Vincent arrived, he was operating on Brenda's heightened narrative. He didn't see a man waiting for a realtor. He saw the dangerous subject with a possible weapon. This is the fatal flaw in reliance on biased 911. Calls the officer borrows the fear and prejudice of the caller. Vincent approached the car with his adrenaline spiking. He ignored the calm demeanor of the driver. He ignored the expensive suit. He ignored the professional greeting. "Driver's license. Now," Vincent barked, skipping the introduction, skipping the explanation. He stood with his feet apart, asserting dominance. Thorne didn't move his hands from the wheel. He looked at Vincent with a gaze that was steady and analytical. "Officer Vincent." Thorne said, reading the nameplate again. I'm happy to cooperate, but I'd like to know the reason for this interaction. Am I being detained, or is this a consensual conversation? Vincent's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to questions. He was used to fear. I said, give me your ID. We have reports of suspicious activity in this area. You're loitering. Now hand it over, or I'm pulling you out of the car. Loitering requires intent to commit a crime or lingering in a place where one has no business. Thorne said, his voice remaining level, almost like a professor lecturing a student. I am parked on a public street waiting for a real estate appointment at 10:30. That is not loitering. As for my ID under state law, unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime, I am not required to identify myself. Vincent felt a flush of heat rise up his neck. It was the anger of a man whose authority was being checked by someone he viewed as inferior. You want to play lawyer, Vincent sneered. Get out of the car, now. The command hung in the air, heavy with implication. Get out of the car. It was a lawful order only if the stop itself was lawful, and Thorne knew that Vincent was skating on thin ice. Pennsylvania v. Mims allowed officers to order drivers out of vehicles for safety, but the initial stop still had to be valid. Thorne made a calculation. He could refuse lock the door and wait for a supervisor, which might lead to his window being smashed and a taser being deployed. Or he could comply, allow the violation to happen, and secure the evidence needed to ensure this officer never did this to anyone else again. Thorne chose the long game. I will step out of the vehicle, Thorne said, narrating his actions for the body camera he knew was recording. I am complying with your order, Officer Vincent, though I am stating for the record that I believe this stop is a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable seizure. Thorne slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the door with his left hand, keeping his right hand visible. He stepped out, standing to his full height of 6'2". He towered slightly over Vincent. The officer stepped back, his hand now gripping the handle of his gun. Turn around. Hands on the roof, Vincent commanded. Is this a Terry stop, officer? Thorne asked, placing his hands on the roof of his own Audi. Do you have specific and articulable facts that I am armed and dangerous? Vincent didn't answer. He stepped forward and kicked Thorne's feet apart. Spread 'em. He began a pat-down, his hands rough and invasive. He patted down Thorne's suit jacket, feeling the wallet, the phone, the pen. I found a wallet, Vincent said, reaching into the inside pocket. I didn't give consent for a search, Thorne said sharply. A pat-down is for weapons only. Reaching into my pocket to retrieve ID during a detention without arrest is a gray area you don't want to be an officer. Vincent ignored him. He yanked the wallet out and flipped it open. He looked at the driver's license. Marcus Thorne. The name didn't ring a bell. He missed the other card behind it, the retired credentials, the gold shield that said Deputy Chief. He was too focused on the victory of getting the ID. Marcus, Vincent said deliberately, using the first name to demean him. See, was that so hard? Now let's run you and see what warrants pop up. You are holding me without cause, Thorne said. I have identified myself. I have explained my presence. You have found no weapons. You are now prolonging this stop beyond the time reasonably required to address the initial suspicion. Rodriguez v. United States, you are clocking up civil liability by the second. Vincent laughed, a short, sharp bark. You know a lot of court cases for a guy sitting in a car. That tells me you've been in the system before. Jailhouse lawyer, huh? Vincent walked back to his cruiser, keeping Thorne standing by the car. Stay right there. Don't move. By now, the neighborhood was waking up to the scene. The real estate agent, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, pulled up in her white SUV across the street. She saw her client, Dr. Thorne, a man she knew was a distinguished former police executive, standing with his hands on his car being detained by a patrol officer. She gasped, putting her car in park and grabbing her phone. She didn't call 911. She started recording. 2 houses down, a young man who followed local politics recognized Thorne instantly. He stepped out onto his porch, phone raised. "Hey!" the neighbor shouted. "That's Dr. Thorne! What are you doing?" Vincent ignored the bystanders. He sat in his cruiser typing the name into the terminal. He waited for the hit. He waited for the warrant for unpaid child support, or the suspended license, or the prior felony. The screen refreshed. No warrants. License valid. Vehicle registered to Marcus Thorne. Then the employment history field populated from the state database. Previous employment: state police. Deputy Chief retired. Current status: active instructor, State Academy. Vincent blinked. He read it again. His stomach gave a strange lurch, a mix of confusion and denial. It couldn't be right. This guy, the loiterer. But instead of stepping back, Vincent doubled down. This is a psychological phenomenon often seen in misconduct cases: escalation of commitment. When faced with evidence that they are wrong, the biased mind searches for a reason to be right. He's a retired chief. Then he should know better than to give me attitude, Vincent thought. He's testing me. He thinks he's above the law because he used to be a cop. The ego took over. Vincent got out of the car, storming back toward Thorne. He didn't apologize. He didn't release him. "So you used to be on the job," Vincent said, his voice aggressive. "That's why you think you can disrespect a patrol officer. You know the drill. When I ask for ID, you give it." "I know the law, Officer Vincent," Thorne said, turning his head slightly. "And I know that you have currently detained a citizen for 18 minutes without probable cause. You have searched me illegally, and now you are engaging in a retaliatory detention because your ego is bruised." Vincent snapped. He grabbed Thorne's wrist. "That's it. You're under arrest." Thorne didn't resist. He didn't pull away. He let Vincent twist his arm behind his back. "On what charge?" Thorne asked calmly. "Disorderly conduct, resisting without violence, and failure to obey a lawful order." Vincent pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked around Thorne's wrists. The bystanders were shouting now. "He's a deputy chief," the neighbor yelled. "You idiot, look at who you're arresting." Vincent shoved Thorne against the side of the Audi, tightening the cuffs unnecessarily. "I don't care who you think you are," Vincent hissed in Thorne's ear. "On my street, you listen to me." Vincent reached for his radio to call for transport. He pressed the orange emergency button on his radio, a signal that an officer is in distress or has a non-compliant suspect. It was a move designed to bring backup fast, to show force. "Unit 4 Alpha 1 in custody, requesting transport. Subject is uncooperative." Minutes later, a siren wailed in the distance. A supervisor's SUV tore around the corner, followed by another patrol car. Sergeant David Miller was the field supervisor on duty. He was a 15-year veteran, a man who took his job seriously. He had heard Vincent's voice on the radio, stressed, angry, aggressive. Miller had been worried about Vincent for months. He pulled up to the scene expecting a brawl. What he saw was a man in a suit, handcuffed, standing calmly while Vincent held his arm. Miller got out of his SUV, adjusting his belt. He walked quickly toward them. "Vincent, what do we have?" Miller asked, his eyes scanning the suspect. Then he stopped. He froze mid-step. He looked at the man in handcuffs. He looked at the face he had seen in textbooks, the face of the man who had shaken his hand at his own graduation from the academy 12 years ago. The face of the man whose signature was on the certificate hanging in Miller's office. Miller's blood ran cold. He felt a wave of nausea. "Oh my God," Miller whispered. He looked at Vincent, who was still puffing his chest out. "Sarge, this guy refused ID, was loitering, gave me attitude. I got him on disorderly and resisting." Miller looked back at Thorne. Thorne looked at Miller, his expression one of profound disappointment. "Hello, Sergeant Miller," Thorne said. "I believe we met at the leadership seminar in Springfield last year." Miller scrambled forward, pushing Vincent's hand away from Thorne's arm. Officer Vincent, step back. Miller barked, his voice cracking with panic. Step back right now. Sarge, what's the problem? Vincent asked, confused by the sudden hostility from his boss. Do you know who this is? Miller screamed, pulling the key from his belt. He fumbled with the handcuffs, his hands shaking. This is Deputy Chief Marcus Thorne. He runs the ethics division. You just arrested the man who writes the use of force policy. Vincent stood there, the color draining from his face. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. The handcuffs clicked open. Miller carefully removed them. Chief, I am so sorry. I have no words. Are you injured? Thorne rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bit into the skin. He adjusted his suit jacket, straightening his tie. He looked at Vincent, who was now trembling, looking like a child who had broken a priceless vase. Thorne didn't yell. He didn't curse. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying authority of a man who knows he holds all the cards. Sergeant Miller, Thorne said. Secure Officer Vincent's weapon and badge. Place him in the back of your vehicle. I want a full inquiry initiated immediately. I want the body camera footage pulled and preserved before anyone touches a server. And I want the captain here, now. Vincent tried to speak. I didn't know. Thorne cut him off with a look. It shouldn't matter who I am, Officer Vincent. That is the point. If I were a plumber or a teacher or unemployed, I still have rights. You violated them. You violated your oath. And you did it with an arrogance that tells me this isn't the first time. Miller turned to Vincent. Give me your badge, now. Vincent slowly unpinned the shield from his chest. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped it. It clattered on the asphalt, a sound that signaled the end of his career. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The investigation didn't take months. It took days. The body camera footage was damning. It showed a polite, compliant citizen and a belligerent, power-hungry officer. The department tried to keep it quiet, but Thorne refused a quiet settlement. He sued. He sued not for the money, but to force the evidence into the public domain. The city settled for $4.5 million to avoid a jury trial that would have been a public relations massacre. Kyle Vincent was fired 3 weeks later. The review board, headed by independent auditors, cited gross incompetence, civil rights violations, and conduct unbecoming. But Thorne went further. He petitioned the State Peace Officer Standards and Training Board to decertify Vincent. He testified at the hearing himself. Vincent lost his certification. He would never be a police officer again. He was 28 with no other skills branded permanently as the officer who profiled the wrong man. The last reports heard of him, he was working in a warehouse in a different state loading trucks. The Oak Ridge incident changed policy. The Thorne rule was implemented requiring supervisors to be present before any arrest for disorderly conduct or resisting could be finalized, preventing officers from using those charges as cover for contempt of cop. Dr. Thorne donated a significant portion of the settlement to a legal defense fund for victims of racial profiling who didn't have his rank or resources. He eventually bought the house on Elmwood Drive. Every day when he drives his car down that street, he waves to Mrs. Higgins. She never waves back. She stays behind her curtains. But the message was delivered. We have to ask ourselves if this can happen to a deputy chief, a man who knows the law better than the officers enforcing it. What happens to the teenager who doesn't know his rights? What happens to the construction worker who just wants to get home? Justice shouldn't depend on who you are. It should be the standard for everyone. Dr. Thorne proved that a badge is a heavy thing to carry. If you aren't strong enough to carry it with integrity, you shouldn't carry it at all. Kyle Vincent learned that lesson too late. Don't let his mistake be yours. What do you think? Should officers be personally liable for civil rights lawsuits paying out of their own pensions instead of the taxpayers footing the bill? And how do we fix a system where neighbors feel comfortable calling the police on people just for existing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story powerful, please like and share it. It helps us keep the truth in the spotlight. Until next time, stay safe and know your rights.
Step away from the vehicle, now, and give me your ID.
Officer, I'm on private property committing no crime. Am I being detained or am I free to go?
You're being detained for obstruction. Hands on the car.
Refusing an unlawful order is not obstruction.
Stop reaching. Get on the ground.
The high-definition lens of the body camera mounted on Officer Kyle Brannigan's chest was recording in 1080p, capturing every pixel of the sunny Saturday morning, every dust mote dancing in the light, and ultimately every second of the mistake that would destroy his life. Brannigan, a 27-year-old patrolman with 3 years on the force and a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas, had absolutely no idea that the man he was pulling up behind was not a drug dealer, not a vagrant, and certainly not a criminal. The man methodically wiping down the chrome bumper of a pristine 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1 was Colonel Marcus Thorne, United States Marine Corps, retired. Thorne had led battalions in the Gulf, commanded special operations task forces in the Horn of Africa, and carried shrapnel in his left hip that triggered metal detectors at 3 different airports. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't hiding anything. He was simply enjoying the peace of a Saturday wash, a ritual he had maintained since he returned stateside 15 years ago. But before we get into the details of this infuriating encounter, I need you to take a second. Pause the video, scroll down, and let me know in the comments. Do you think law enforcement officers today receive enough training on how to respect our veterans? Type yes or no. This story is going to make your blood boil, and you need to see how it ends. Marcus Thorne stood 6'2", his posture as straight as a plumb line despite the ache in his joints that came with humidity. At 58 years old, his hair was graying at the temples, cut in a high and tight that hadn't changed since Paris Island. He wore a simple gray t-shirt with no logos, well-fitted blue jeans, and polished work boots. To the casual observer, he was just an older black man taking care of a classic car. To Officer Brannigan, who was cruising the parking lot of the self-service car wash looking for activity, Thorne fit a profile. Brannigan had been told by his field training officer years ago that drug dealers often used loud self-service car washes to conduct transactions under the noise of the sprayers. He had also been told that expensive vintage cars in this particular district usually meant new money from illicit sources. It was lazy police work, the kind based on assumptions rather than intelligence, but Brannigan prided himself on being a wolf hunter. He parked his cruiser at an angle blocking the exit of the wash bay. It was an aggressive move designed to establish dominance before a word was even spoken. Thorne noticed the cruiser in his peripheral vision. He didn't turn immediately. He finished drying the rear quarter panel with his microfiber cloth, folded it neatly, and placed it in the bucket. Only then did he turn to face the officer. Thorne's face was a mask of calm discipline. He had stared down warlords and negotiated with tribal leaders who had AK-47s pointed at his chest. A 20-something cop with a bad attitude didn't elevate his heart rate by a single beat. Brannigan stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his duty belt. He didn't wave. He didn't say hello. He walked with his hand resting near his holster, chest puffed out sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Hey, you," Brannigan called out, his voice echoing slightly against the tiled walls of the wash bay. "Step away from the vehicle." Thorne remained standing by the driver's side door. He didn't step away, but he didn't advance either. He kept his hands clearly visible, hanging loosely at his sides, a non-threatening posture that every veteran knows is actually a position of readiness. "Is there a problem, officer?" Thorne's voice was a deep baritone, steady and devoid of fear. "I said step away from the vehicle," Brannigan repeated louder this time, closing the distance. "And let me see some ID." Thorne looked at the young man. He saw the tension in the officer's jaw, the lack of professional courtesy. He recognized the type immediately. He had seen young Marines like this, eager for a fight, lacking the wisdom to know when to pick one. Officer, Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. I am washing my vehicle on private property. I have paid for the service. Unless you have a specific reason for this interruption, I'd like to finish my work. I'm investigating a report of loitering and potential narcotics activity in the area. Brannigan lied. There was no report. He was fishing. Now, for the last time, give me your ID or I'm going to pull you out of here. Thorne didn't flinch. He knew the Fourth Amendment better than most lawyers. He had spent years studying the Constitution. He had sworn an oath to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He knew that in this moment, the domestic threat to the Constitution was standing right in front of him wearing a badge. Officer, Thorne said, keeping his hands where Brannigan could see them. You are conducting a Terry stop. For that to be lawful, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime. Loitering while washing a car at a car wash is not a crime, and a vague reference to narcotics activity without specific facts linking me to it does not meet the legal standard for a detention. I am not obligated to provide identification unless I am being lawfully detained for a specific crime. Brannigan stopped. He blinked behind his sunglasses. He wasn't used to people talking back, and he certainly wasn't used to suspects citing Supreme Court standards. You a lawyer? Brannigan sneered, stepping into Thorne's personal space. No, Thorne replied. I'm a citizen who knows his rights. Am I free to go, or am I being detained? You're detained, Brannigan snapped, for obstruction. Refusing to surrender my rights is not obstruction, Thorne said calmly. It is the exercise of the very freedoms you are paid to protect. If you are detaining me, state the crime. If you cannot state the crime, remove your vehicle from the exit so I can leave. The air in the car wash bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. The sound of a vacuum cleaner hummed in the distance, but around them it was silent. Brannigan's ego was bruising rapidly. He had made a command decision to stop this man, and backing down now would make him look weak. In his mind, compliance was mandatory, regardless of the law. I don't need to explain myself to you, Brannigan said, his hand twitching near his taser. You fit the description of a suspect we're looking for. Now turn around and place your hands on the car. What description? Thorne pressed. A black man washing a car, that is not a description, officer. That is a bias. I'm not asking again, Brannigan shouted. Thorne sighed. He looked at the officer with a mixture of pity and disappointment. Son, you are making a mistake. A career-ending mistake. I am asking you as one public servant to another to de-escalate this situation, get back in your car and drive away. No harm, no foul. Don't you call me son, Brannigan yelled. Hands on the car. Now. Thorne didn't move toward the car. He knew that submitting to an unlawful order often legitimized it in court later. He stood his ground, not aggressively, but immovably. I will not, Thorne said. I have done nothing wrong. I am going to reach for my drying towel to finish my work. I am not reaching for a weapon. It was a test of the officer's discipline. Thorne moved his right hand slowly toward the yellow microfiber cloth sitting on the hood of the Mustang. It was a slow, deliberate movement, telegraphing his intent. But Brannigan didn't see a towel. He saw a challenge. He saw a suspect refusing to submit to his authority. And in that split second, Brannigan decided that force was the only language this man would understand. He's reaching, Brannigan screamed, mostly for the benefit of his body camera, trying to create a narrative of danger where none existed. He drew his taser in a fluid motion, the yellow plastic weapon leveling at Thorne's chest. Get on the ground. Get on the ground now, or I will tase you. Thorne froze. He looked at the prongs of the taser. He had seen men take shrapnel and keep moving, but he also knew that electricity didn't care about willpower. He had artificial components in his hip and shoulder. A fall onto the concrete could be catastrophic. I am not resisting, Thorne said, clearly, his voice booming. "I'm standing still. Put the weapon away. On the ground." Brannigan lunged forward, bypassing the taser deployment and opting to go hands-on. He holstered the taser and grabbed Thorne's left wrist, twisting it violently behind his back. Thorne winced. The torque on his shoulder, a shoulder that had been reconstructed after an IED blast in Fallujah, sent a blinding bolt of white-hot pain shooting up his neck. His instinct, honed by 30 years of combat training, was to disarm the attacker. He could have. Even at 58, Thorne knew 3 different ways to break the young officer's arm before Brannigan could blink. But he also knew that if he fought back, he would be shot. The headline would read, "Officer Involved Shooting," and the truth would be buried with him. So he did the hardest thing a warrior can do. He submitted. "You are injuring a pre-existing combat wound," Thorne gritted out through clenched teeth as Brannigan slammed him against the wet metal of the Mustang. "I am not resisting." "Stop fighting me!" Brannigan yelled, breathing hard, wrestling with a man who wasn't wrestling back. He kicked Thorne's legs apart, forcing him to spread his stance wide. He grabbed the other wrist and cranked it back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and metallic. Click, click, click. By now, a small crowd had gathered. A woman vacuuming her minivan 2 bays down had stopped and was holding up her phone. A young man in a hoodie was recording from the sidewalk. "Why you arresting him?" the woman shouted. "He was just washing his car. I watched him for 20 minutes. "Back up!" Brannigan yelled over his shoulder, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Back the hell up or you're next." Thorne stood, pressed against his beloved car, his cheek against the cold roof. He felt the humiliation burning hotter than the pain in his shoulder. He had worn the uniform of his country. He had commanded thousands of men. He had sat in the Situation Room. And now he was being treated like a criminal by a man who wasn't even born when Thorne was earning his first Bronze Star. "Officer," Thorne said, his voice low and dangerous, "you have just arrested a retired Marine colonel without probable cause. You have used excessive force on a disabled veteran. Every second of this is being recorded. I want you to remember this moment, because this is the moment your badge became a liability to your city." "Shut up," Brannigan panted, patting down Thorne's pockets. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and disorderly conduct." "There was no arrest to resist until you invented one," Thorne replied. "Reach into my front left pocket. You will find my wallet. Inside is my identification." Brannigan fished the wallet out. He didn't look at it immediately. He was too pumped up on adrenaline and anger. He shoved the wallet into his own pocket. "We'll sort that out at the station. Right now, I'm searching this vehicle." "Incident to arrest." "I do not consent to a search," Thorne stated firmly. "Arizona v. Gant. You cannot search my vehicle incident to arrest unless I am within reaching distance of the passenger compartment, or you have reason to believe evidence of the crime of arrest is inside. I am handcuffed and in your custody. There is no evidence of obstruction in my glove box. If you open that door, you are violating the Fourth Amendment again." Brannigan laughed a short, nervous bark. "I'm towing the car. It's an inventory search. I can look wherever I want." Brannigan left Thorne standing by the cruiser, supervised by a second officer who had just arrived, a rookie named Evans, who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Evans didn't say a word, just watched Thorne with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Thorne stood tall, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, watching Brannigan approach the Mustang. Brannigan pulled open the driver's side door. The interior smelled of leather and vanilla. It was immaculate. No trash, no loose change, no baggies of drugs. Brannigan ripped up the floor mats, looking for hidden compartments. Nothing. He checked under the seats. Nothing. He was starting to sweat more profusely now. He needed to find something, anything, to justify the stop. A roach clip, an open container, a weapon. He popped the glove box. Inside there was a neat stack of papers and a small leather-bound case. Brannigan grabbed the papers first. Vehicle registration, insurance, proof of ownership. All current. all in the name of Marcus Aurelius Thorne. Then he saw the leather case. He opened it. Inside was a Purple Heart medal resting on purple velvet. Next to it was a set of military identification cards. One was a standard retired ID. The other was a Department of Defense building pass with a clearance level indicator that Brannigan had never seen before top secret at SCI. Brannigan stared at the medal. The gold heart with the profile of George Washington seemed to glare at him. Beside the case lay a folded triangular American flag encased in plastic, a memorial flag, and tucked in the back of the glove box was a Sig Sauer P226. Brannigan grabbed the gun. It was holstered. He checked the magazine. Full. He ran the serial number on his radio. "Dispatch, run a firearm for me." "Go ahead, 1 Adam 12. He read the numbers. A pause. 1 Adam 12, that weapon is registered to a Marcus Thorne. CCW permit is active and valid. No wants, no warrants. Subject is flagged as... Wait 1. Flagged as what? Brannigan asked, feeling a cold pit open in his stomach. Subject is flagged in the federal database as a Tier 1 person of interest, protected status. Retired military high command. Dispatch advises handle with extreme caution and professional courtesy. 1 Adam 12. Do you have this subject detained? Brannigan looked back at Thorne. The colonel was watching him. Thorne didn't look angry anymore. He looked like a judge waiting to deliver a sentence. I have him in custody. Brannigan stammered into the radio. 1 Adam 12. Watch commander wants you to 1022 immediately. Disregard. Let him go. Brannigan looked at the crowd filming him. He looked at Thorne. He looked at the rookie Evans. If he let him go now, he admitted he was wrong. He admitted he had screwed up in front of everyone. His pride wouldn't allow it. The warrior in him couldn't retreat. Negative dispatch. Brannigan said, his voice shaking slightly. Subject was belligerent and resisted. We are 10-15 to the station. I'm bringing him in. He slammed the glove box shut, tossing the Purple Heart back in carelessly. He walked back to Thorne. Found a gun, Brannigan said, trying to sound tough. A legal firearm, Thorne corrected, which you now have to account for. Get in the car, Brannigan said, grabbing Thorne's arm and shoving him toward the back seat of the cruiser. He pushed Thorne's head down roughly. Thorne maneuvered his stiff legs into the cramped plastic seat. The doors slammed shut. The cage separated them. As Brannigan drove away, the crowd continued to film. Thorne sat in the back, eyes closed, breathing through the pain in his shoulder. He wasn't praying for himself. He was praying for the young officer. Because Marcus Thorne knew that once he made his phone call, the storm that was coming would be biblical. The ride to the precinct took 12 minutes. Brannigan played the radio loud, trying to drown out the silence from the back seat. He was trying to convince himself he had done the right thing. He didn't listen, Brannigan thought. You have to listen to police. That's the rule. But the image of that Purple Heart kept flashing in his mind. They pulled into the sally port. The heavy steel doors rolled down behind them. Brannigan hauled Thorne out of the car. Thorne's legs were stiff, and he stumbled slightly. Brannigan jerked him upright. Watch your step, he muttered less aggressively than before. They walked into the booking area. The smell of stale coffee and industrial cleaner hit them. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 62, a relic of the old breed. He had a mustache that could scrub a pot and eyes that had seen every lie a human being could tell. He was reading a newspaper, a habit he refused to break for a smartphone. Miller looked up as Brannigan wrestled Thorne toward the bench. Miller's eyes went from Brannigan to Thorne, and then they stopped. Miller squinted. He stood up slowly, the newspaper sliding to the floor. Kyle? Miller said, his voice strangely quiet. What do you have there? Resisting obstruction disorderly. Brannigan rattled off. Refused to ID became combatant. Miller walked around the desk. He didn't look at Brannigan. He walked straight up to Thorne. Miller looked at the way Thorne held himself even in cuffs. He looked at the high and tight haircut. He looked at the scar on Thorne's neck, a faint white line left by a sniper's bullet in 1991. "Colonel," Miller asked, his voice trembling. Thorne looked at the sergeant. He recognized the tone. "Sergeant." Thorne nodded. "I believe I am currently a prisoner of war in my own country." Miller's face went white. He turned on Brannigan with a speed that belied his age. "Take those cuffs off, now!" "Sarge, he resisted, I said, take them off!" Miller roared, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "Do you know who this is? This is Colonel Marcus Thorne. He commanded the 1st Marine Division. My brother served under him in Fallujah. He's a goddamn war hero, you idiot." Brannigan froze. The keys felt slippery in his hand. He wouldn't show me ID." Miller snatched the keys from Brannigan's hand. He spun Thorne around and unlocked the cuffs with gentle, trembling hands. "Colonel, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Thorne rubbed his wrists. The skin was chafed and bleeding slightly. He rolled his shoulder, a sickening pop audible in the quiet room. "Thank you, Sergeant. I need you to log that injury, and I need to see your captain. Immediately." "He's in his office, sir. I'll get him." Miller glared at Brannigan. "You, sit in that chair. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't even breathe until I tell you to." Brannigan sat. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He watched Thorne massaging his wrist. Thorne didn't look at him. Thorne was looking at the booking camera, ensuring his face and his condition were being recorded. Captain Reynolds burst through the door 2 minutes later, trailing Miller. Reynolds was a politician in uniform, always worried about optics. He took in the scene, the furious sergeant, the terrified rookie, the sullen Brannigan, and the calm, dignified black man standing in the center of the room like a statue of judgment. "Colonel Thorne," Reynolds said, extending a hand. "I'm Captain Reynolds. There's obviously been a terrible misunderstanding. Please come to my office. Let's get you some coffee, maybe some ice for that wrist." Thorne didn't shake the hand. "Captain, this was not a misunderstanding. This was a violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Your officer unlawfully detained me, assaulted me, kidnapped me, and conducted an illegal search of my property. I don't want coffee. I want my property returned. I want to file a formal criminal complaint against Officer Brannigan, and I want the preservation of all video evidence." Captain Reynolds blinked. He dropped his hand. "Colonel, surely we can work this out. Officer Brannigan is young. He's zealous. We can handle this internally. I can have him disciplined. But filing charges, that's going to be a circus." "A circus is exactly what you have here, Captain." Thorne replied, cold as ice. "You have allowed a culture to fester, where a citizen cannot wash his car without being accosted by an armed agent of the state. If I were a 19-year-old kid with no knowledge of the law, I'd be in a cell right now with a resisting charge that would ruin my future. I am not doing this for me. I am doing it for the man he stops next week." Reynolds sighed. He knew he was beaten. "I understand, Colonel. We will process the complaint. You are free to go, obviously. We'll drive you back to your car." "I will take a cab," Thorne said. "I don't feel safe in one of your vehicles right now, but before I leave I have a demand." "Name it," Reynolds said. "I want the body camera footage. Dash cam and body cam. I want the raw files secured. I am putting you on notice regarding spoliation of evidence. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, if the audio cuts out, if the files are corrupted, I will sue this department for everything it has, and I will personally lobby the Department of Justice to dismantle this precinct brick by brick." Brannigan, sitting in the corner, felt like he was drowning. He watched the captain. The man he feared most nodded submissively to the suspect he had arrested. "It will be preserved, sir. You have my word." "Your word isn't enough, Captain. The law is what matters." Thorne turned to Brannigan. He walked over to the chair where the young officer sat. Brannigan looked up, expecting a shout, a curse something. Thorne spoke quietly. "You dishonored your badge, son. But worse, you dishonored the flag you wear on your shoulder. I bled for that flag. You just hid behind it." Thorne turned and walked out of the precinct. He walked with a limp he didn't have that morning. He called an Uber from the sidewalk. He waited standing in the sun while inside the station the shouting finally began. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday 3 days after the incident, but the court of public opinion was already in session. The video from the woman at the car wash had been posted to TikTok, then Twitter, then Facebook. It was titled, "Hero Marine Arrested for Washing Car While Black." The views climbed into the millions overnight. The visual was undeniable, a calm, older man being slammed against a classic car by a screaming, aggressive young cop. The comments section was a firestorm. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations, and car enthusiasts all united in fury. "That's Colonel Thorne. He was my CO in the Gulf. This is a disgrace. I'm a retired cop of 30 years. That stop was bad from second one. No PC, no reason. Since when is drying a Mustang a crime?" Then the body cam footage was released. Thorne's lawyer had successfully petitioned for an emergency release of the footage in the interest of public safety. If the cell phone video was the spark, the body cam was the gasoline. The public watched the entire interaction. They heard Brannigan's arrogance. They heard Thorne's calm legal citations. They watched the search of the glove box. The moment Brannigan held the Purple Heart in his hand and then threw it back, that moment broke the internet. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. They all ran the story. It was the rare news cycle where everyone agreed. The optics of a white officer disrespecting a black veteran's Purple Heart were indefensible. Internal Affairs launched a comprehensive investigation, but the conclusion was foregone. They dug into Brannigan's history. They found a pattern. Over his 3 years, Brannigan had stopped African-American men over the age of 40 at a rate 4 times higher than the department average. His notes were always vague, suspicious demeanor, furrowed brow, evasive answers. He had been building a career on bullying men he thought wouldn't fight back. The report was 90 pages long. It detailed 22 violations of department policy in the Thorne arrest alone. Unlawful detention, excessive force, unlawful search, failure to de-escalate, conduct unbecoming. The union tried to fight it. They claimed Brannigan was under stress and feared for his life. But the video didn't lie. Thorne was holding a yellow towel. There was no weapon. There was no threat. Only a bias that had been allowed to wear a badge. 6 months later, the settlement was finalized. The city settled with Marcus Thorne for $1.5 million. They didn't want a jury trial. They knew a jury would have given him 10 times that amount, just out of spite. On the day the check cleared, Thorne held a press conference. He stood at a podium. His arm in a sling. Surgery had been required to repair the torn rotator cuff from the arrest. He looked at the cameras. "I have spent my life serving this country," Thorne said, "and I believe in the rule of law, but laws are only as good as the men and women who enforce them. Officer Brannigan was not a bad apple. He was the product of a system that prioritizes compliance over constitutional rights." Thorne held up the check. "I don't need this money. My pension serves me fine. So I am donating this entire amount, $1.5 million, to the Wounded Warrior Project and to a new legal defense fund for veterans who have been victims of police misconduct." Kyle Brannigan was fired. His certification was revoked by the state board, meaning he could never work as a police officer in that state again. He was sued personally in civil court and forced to declare bankruptcy. His name became a cautionary tale in police academies across the nation. "Don't pull a Brannigan" became shorthand for an unconstitutional stop. The final scene of our story takes us back to that car wash. It's a year later. The sun is shining. The 1969 Mustang is there gleaming in the light. Marcus Thorne is there too. His shoulder is stiff and he can't lift his left arm above his head anymore, so he has to use a step stool to dry the roof. He wipes the water away, revealing the deep, flawless paint beneath. A patrol car pulls into the lot. It slows down. The officer inside is young, maybe Brannigan's age. He rolls down the window. Thorne tenses up. He watches the car. The officer looks at Thorne. Then he looks at the Mustang. The officer nods respectfully, raises a hand in a wave, and drives on. Thorne watches him go. He takes a deep breath, the smell of soap and wax filling his lungs. He picks up his yellow towel. He has won the battle, but the war for justice that never truly ends. This story isn't just about one bad stop. It's about the dignity we owe to the men and women who served and the rights that every citizen possesses regardless of what they look like or what car they drive. Marcus Thorne had the rank, the knowledge, and the resources to fight back. But what about the people who don't? What about the 19-year-old kid who gets scared and pleads guilty just to go home? If this story moved you, if you believe in holding power accountable, I need you to do two things. First, share this video with a veteran you know. Second, ask yourself, if you were in Colonel Thorne's shoes, would you have kept your cool? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, know your rights, and never stop holding the line. See you in the next one.